The morning sun rose weakly over the dirt-streaked horizon. Its rays filtered through a mist of dust and the low rumble of restless animals. Wooden pens creaked, ropes strained, and men's voices echoed across the sprawling auction yard. It was not a place of mercy, it was a market of endings. Cows with hollow eyes stood motionless, horses snorted nervously, and the sharp crack of a whip sliced through the air now and then, a sound that made even the strongest animals flinch. Near the farthest corner, half hidden behind the shadow of a rusted fence, stood a donkey whose gray coat was stained with mud and scars. His legs trembled as he tried to stay upright, and every movement betrayed the weight of exhaustion. His name, though few cared to remember it, was Juno. The auctioneer's voice barked out numbers with mechanical indifference, each sale punctuated by the hard slap of a gavel. But when he came to Juno, there was only silence. "One old donkey," the man called, glancing briefly toward the animal. "Strong once, I suppose." Starting bid, 5. The crowd laughed. Someone shouted, 5 cents for dog food. Another chimed in, "I wouldn't take him for free." The auctioneer smirked, his patience thinning. "Come on now. He eats less than a mule. Who'll take him?" No one moved. The donkey blinked slowly, ears twitching, as if the noise itself was too heavy to bear. Finally, the auctioneer slammed his gavel once more. "Unsold," he muttered, marking the list. The word hung in the air like a sentence. From the edge of the crowd, a boy watched quietly. Barefoot, thin as a reed, with straw-colored hair that caught the light, he couldn't have been more than 14. His clothes were torn, patched in places with fabric that didn't match, but his eyes were bright, wide with something the others lacked: compassion. His name was Eli, and unlike the shouting men, he didn't see a worthless beast. He saw fear, confusion, and a faint, desperate spark of life. He whispered under his breath, "He's just tired, not broken." His father stood beside him, a tall man with hands hardened by years of labor, his face weathered by the sun. "Don't stare, Eli," he said gruffly. "We can't save every animal." But the boy didn't move. The auction was nearly over, and already a cart was being hitched to take the unsold animals away. Eli's gaze followed the donkey as 2 men tugged at his rope, forcing him toward the gate. The creature stumbled, knees hitting the dirt with a dull thud. A few onlookers chuckled. Eli felt something twist inside him, pity mingled with anger. He broke away from his father and rushed forward, ignoring the men's shouts. "Stop! He's thirsty," he cried. Reaching into his satchel, he pulled out a small tin cup, filled it from a nearby bucket, and knelt beside the fallen donkey. The animal's sides heaved as he tried to breathe. Slowly, Eli held the cup under his muzzle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a weak shudder, Juno's cracked lips touched the edge, and he drank. The men exchanged amused glances. "What's the point, boy?" one scoffed. "He'll be gone by sunset." But Eli didn't hear them. He was watching the donkey's eyes, deep, dark, uncertain, yet flickering faintly with life. By the time Eli's father caught up, the boy was brushing dirt from the donkey's mane. "Eli," his father warned, his tone low, "enough." The boy rose to his feet, but didn't back away. "He's going to be killed, isn't he?" he asked. His father sighed. "They'll put down the ones that can't sell. That's how it's always been." The boy's jaw tightened. "But it doesn't have to be." His father shook his head, already weary. "We can't afford another mouth to feed. You'll understand one day." He turned and started walking, but Eli stayed rooted in place, his heart pounding with a quiet defiance. As the crowd dispersed, the sun climbed higher, beating down on the dirt yard until the ground shimmered with heat. Workers began loading the unsold animals into a rusted truck. Juno resisted weakly, his hooves scraping against the wooden ramp, but he was too frail to fight. Eli watched from behind the fence, fists clenched at his sides. The driver shouted for someone to push the donkey aboard. That was the moment something inside the boy snapped. Without thinking, he vaulted over the fence and planted himself in front of the truck. The driver slammed on the brakes. "What in blazes? Get out of the way, kid." Dust swirled around Eli, coating his skin, but he didn't move. His voice cracked as he shouted, "He's mine. I'll take him." The yard fell silent. Men turned to look. A few laughed, shaking their heads. "You," one said mockingly. "You can't even buy yourself a meal." But Eli didn't flinch. "I'll take him," he repeated, his voice steady this time. "Please." The auctioneer, curious, stepped forward. His stern expression softened slightly as he studied the boy. "You've got coins, son?" he asked. Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled coins, everything he had earned over months of helping in the stables, cleaning stalls, and carrying water buckets. He held them out in his open palm, trembling. The man hesitated. "That's not much," he said, "but fine. Take him. He's yours." The crowd murmured as Eli handed over the coins. One of the men chuckled. "He'll die before the week's out." Eli ignored him. Carefully, he approached Juno, untying the rope from the truck rail. The donkey stood still, wary but not resisting. Eli took the rope gently, whispering, "Come on, boy. Let's go home." The donkey hesitated, then took a small step forward. Another. Eli's father had stopped halfway down the road, disbelief etched across his face. "Eli, what have you done?" he called. The boy met his eyes, determination glinting through the dust and sunlight. "I did what no one else would." For a long moment, his father said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, he turned and started walking again, muttering under his breath. But even as he walked away, something like pride flickered briefly in his gaze. The boy led Juno slowly out of the auction yard. Each step raised a little cloud of dust, curling golden in the afternoon light. People watched in silence as the scrawny boy and the battered donkey disappeared down the long dirt road. The laughter faded, replaced by something softer, wonder, perhaps, or confusion at what they'd just witnessed. As they reached the edge of the field, Eli stopped to rest. The donkey stood beside him, breathing hard. The wind picked up, stirring the tall grass, carrying with it the faint hum of life beyond the market. Eli placed a hand on the donkey's neck, feeling the coarse hair under his palm. "You're safe now," he whispered. "We'll figure it out." The donkey turned his head slightly, brushing his muzzle against the boy's shoulder, and for the first time that day, Eli smiled. The path ahead was long and uncertain, but in that quiet, fragile moment, something powerful had begun. Two broken souls had found each other in a place built for endings, and somehow, against all odds, they had both walked away alive. The road home stretched endlessly beneath a sky streaked with orange and gold. The air was still except for the soft thud of Juno's hooves and the rhythmic creak of the rope Eli used to guide him. The donkey stumbled often, his breath shallow, his body trembling from exhaustion. Yet, for every faltering step, Eli matched him with quiet patience. The boy spoke softly, his words a steady comfort against the silence. "We'll be there soon," he murmured. "Just a bit farther." When they finally reached the small patch of land behind Eli's family's cottage, the last traces of daylight had already vanished, leaving only the cool breath of evening. Eli's father stood at the doorway, arms crossed, his shadow long in the lantern light. He said nothing at first, only looked at the weary animal and the mud-caked boy beside him. Then he sighed. "You really did it," he muttered. "You brought that dying creature home." Eli nodded. "I promised I'd care for him myself." His father's voice carried no anger, only resignation. "Then you'd better keep that promise." He turned away, leaving the boy and the donkey to the quiet night. Eli smiled faintly and led Juno to the small shed near the back field. It wasn't much, a roof patched with tin, a floor of packed dirt, but it was shelter. That night, Eli barely slept. He lay awake listening to the faint sounds coming from the shed, the donkey shifting, breathing, perhaps dreaming. Each noise stirred something fierce and protective in him. Before dawn, he was already outside, carrying a pail of water and a bundle of hay he'd gathered from the edge of the pasture. Juno didn't move as Eli approached. His head hung low, his ears drooped like wilted leaves. The boy crouched beside him, speaking softly. "I know it hurts," he said, "but you're safe now. No more ropes. No more shouting." He dipped a rag into the water and began gently cleaning the wounds along the donkey's legs. The skin was raw and tender, marked by years of neglect. Eli worked carefully, whispering as he went, as if the sound of kindness itself might heal what medicine could not. Days passed, slow and uncertain. At first, Juno barely ate, taking only a few reluctant bites of hay before turning away. Eli tried everything, crushed apples, sweet oats, even fresh clover from the field, but progress came like a hesitant dawn, one fragile moment at a time. Still, he never gave up. Every morning he was there before the sun, brushing Juno's coat, talking to him, reading aloud from his old schoolbook as if the rhythm of words could reach the broken animal's heart. Sometimes, when the wind was still, he imagined the donkey was listening. His father watched these small rituals from a distance. He never said much, but something in his gaze began to change. The sharpness softened. He had seen his son's stubbornness before, but never this kind of devotion. Once after supper, he asked quietly, "What's the point, Eli?" "He's too old. He'll never work." The boy looked up, spoon paused midair. "Maybe he doesn't have to," he replied simply. "Maybe he just needs someone to believe he can get better." The man didn't respond, but later that night, when he passed the shed, he paused for a long while before continuing on. By the second week, Juno had begun to move more easily. His steps, though slow, no longer trembled. When Eli opened the shed door one morning, the donkey lifted his head and brayed softly, as if in greeting. The sound startled the boy into laughter. "You're talking to me now," he said, rubbing Juno's muzzle. The moment felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. The bond between them had grown, wordless but strong. Where once there had been fear, there was now a fragile kind of trust. It wasn't long before Eli began leading Juno into the open fields. The land stretched wide and uneven, dotted with wildflowers and scattered stones. The donkey walked beside him willingly, though his gait still carried the memory of pain. Eli guided him with gentle touches instead of a whip, his voice replacing commands with encouragement. "That's it, good boy. One step at a time." Each small victory filled the boy with pride. In teaching Juno to move again, he too seemed to find purpose, to heal a part of himself he didn't know was wounded. One afternoon, while brushing Juno's coat, Eli noticed faint rope marks near his neck, deep scars that spoke of years of harsh labor. He traced them with his fingertips, his heart aching. "They hurt you bad, didn't they?" he whispered. The donkey's ear twitched, and for a moment Eli saw something in those dark eyes, memories of cruelty, perhaps, or the long loneliness of being unwanted. The boy understood. He had known loss too. His mother had died when he was little, and ever since, his father's laughter had vanished from their home. Silence had filled its place, thick and heavy. Now somehow, through this broken creature, that silence was beginning to lift. Weeks turned into a month, and Juno's transformation became impossible to ignore. His coat regained a faint shine, and the hollow in his sides filled out. The villagers began to notice as well. When Eli walked him through the market square, people stared. Some smiled, others whispered. A few even nodded approvingly. One old man said, "Didn't think that beast would last a week. Seems you proved us wrong, boy." Eli only smiled. He just needed time. That evening, his father sat with him by the fire. "You've done well," he said quietly. He looked stronger. Eli's heart leapt at the rare praise. "He's learning to trust again," he replied. His father poked the fire absently. "You remind me of your mother," he said after a pause. "She had that same stubborn kindness. Always believed everything could be fixed if you just cared enough." His voice cracked slightly, but he turned away before Eli could answer. For the first time in years, the air between them didn't feel so heavy. Soon after, word spread about the annual village fair. Among the events was a small race, nothing grand, just a friendly contest for young riders. The winner would receive a sack of grain and a few silver coins. When Eli heard about it, his heart stirred with possibility. He imagined standing beside Juno, not as a pitted boy with a broken donkey, but as a team, proof that love and patience could turn despair into strength. His father laughed when he mentioned it. A race? With that donkey? But Eli only grinned. Why not? He's got heart. The next morning, training began. At first, it was a comedy of errors. Juno refused to move faster than a walk, and we did try. His legs tangled clumsily. Eli didn't scold him. He laughed, brushing off the dust and starting again. Slowly, they learned each other's rhythm. Eli adjusted his touch on the reins, learned how to guide without force, how to encourage instead of demand. Every stumble was followed by another try, every failure by quiet praise. "We'll get there," he'd say, patting Juno's neck. "You and me, we always do." By the end of the week, something had shifted. The donkey's steps grew surer, his head held higher. When they trotted down the narrow path at sunset, the golden light caught them both, a boy and a creature once discarded, now moving together as one. Eli's laughter rang across the field, carried by the wind, soft and triumphant. That night, as he leaned against the shed door, watching Juno rest, Eli whispered, "You've come a long way, old friend." The donkey stirred, breathing slow and steady, his eyes closing in peace. The boy smiled to himself, unaware that the hardest test was still ahead, but for now, there was calm, the kind that comes after a long storm. And somewhere deep inside, he believed they were ready for whatever came next. The morning of the race broke bright and sharp, sunlight spilling over the rolling hills and the small village below. A breeze carried the scent of hay, baked bread, and anticipation. The festival had transformed the quiet town square into a sea of color. Banners fluttered, children ran laughing between stalls, and the sound of music rose above the chatter. Yet in the midst of all that noise, Eli felt an almost sacred stillness. Standing beside Juno at the edge of the field, he brushed his hand along the donkey's neck, feeling the coarse hair beneath his fingers. "You ready, boy?" he whispered. Juno flicked an ear, calm but alert, as if understanding that this day meant more than a simple race. Competitors lined up along the track, mostly boys and girls from wealthier families, each astride sleek ponies with shining coats and polished saddles. Eli's patched clothes and the old rope bridle he'd fashioned from scraps drew curious looks. Some whispered, others laughed outright. "He's racing that thing," one boy said, pointing at Juno. "It can barely walk straight." The laughter rippled, but Eli kept his gaze forward. He'd grown used to the mockery. It no longer cut as it once did. He had not come to prove them wrong. He had come to prove something to himself, and perhaps to Juno too. His father stood near the fence, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He hadn't protested Eli's decision this time. He simply said, "If you're doing this, do it with heart." Those words had stayed with Eli all morning, anchoring him when doubt tried to creep in. As the announcer's voice boomed over the crowd, the competitors took their places. Eli climbed onto Juno's back, gripping the rough rope reins tightly. Beneath him, the donkey shifted, steady but tense. The boy leaned forward, whispering, "No matter what happens, we finish together." The signal horn sounded. Hooves thundered against the packed earth as the riders surged forward in a blur of motion. Dust rose like smoke, curling around them. The ponies shot ahead instantly, their riders shouting encouragement, but Eli held Juno back for the first stretch. The donkey's gait was uneven, careful, as though measuring each step. The crowd's laughter reached his ears again. "He's not even trying," someone yelled. Another voice called, "Turn back before the poor thing collapses." Eli felt heat rise in his chest, but he refused to let anger guide him. "Slow and steady," he murmured. "We'll find our pace." Halfway down the first lap, something changed. Perhaps it was the rhythm of the cheering or the steadiness of Eli's voice, but Juno began to move more freely. His legs found a rhythm, his breathing steadied. Eli felt it instantly, the moment when hesitation turned to trust. "That's it, boy," he whispered, leaning close. "You've got this." Together, they began to pick up speed. They passed one rider, then another. The laughter quieted, replaced by murmurs of surprise. The crowd leaned forward, watching the impossible unfold. By the second lap, Eli's heart pounded in time with Juno's strides. The wind whipped through his hair, the world blurred around him. The sound of hooves and breath and heartbeat became one. For the first time, he saw no weakness in Juno, only power, only the will to keep going. Yet, ahead, the leading riders were far in front. Eli knew they couldn't win by speed alone, but it didn't matter. What mattered was finishing together. As they rounded the final bend, a sharp turn on uneven ground, one of the riders ahead lost control. His horse veered suddenly, kicking up dirt that clouded the air. Juno stumbled, hooves slipping. Eli gripped the reins, trying to steady him, but the donkey's leg caught on a rut. Time seemed to slow. The next instant they were falling, earth rushing up, a hard thud, pain shooting through Eli's arm as he hit the ground. The crowd gasped. Dust swirled around them, and for a long moment there was silence. Eli blinked, dazed, his ears ringing. Juno lay beside him, chest heaving, one knee bent awkwardly. The boy crawled closer, his voice shaking. "It's okay, boy, it's okay." He pressed his forehead against the donkey's muzzle, feeling the warm breath against his skin. The rest of the riders thundered past, disappearing into the final stretch. Eli could hear the cheers in the distance, but they sounded far away, like echoes from another world. All he could see was Juno, trembling, struggling to rise. "No," Eli whispered, his throat tight. "You've done enough." But Juno didn't stop trying. The donkey's muscles quivered with effort as he forced himself up, one leg unsteady, eyes fixed forward. Eli's chest ached as he watched. Slowly, painfully, Juno regained his footing. The boy stood beside him, brushing away tears with the back of his hand. "You stubborn old soul," he said, voice breaking. "All right, let's finish this." He climbed back on, ignoring the sting in his arm, and together they began to move again. Each step was heavy, uneven, but it carried more weight than any gallop could. The crowd had fallen silent, their laughter forgotten. Then, as Eli and Juno approached the finish line, something remarkable happened. One voice began to clap, then another. Soon the entire field echoed with applause, not for speed, but for courage. The announcer's voice trembled slightly as he declared, "Though last to finish, this pair has shown the greatest heart of all." The words blurred through Eli's tears. He slid down and wrapped his arms around Juno's neck. The donkey stood still, breathing hard, his sides heaving, but his eyes were calm. They had done it. They had finished. Around them, the villagers cheered, not mockingly now, but with genuine admiration. Among them, Eli's father stepped forward. His usual sternness was gone. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. Eli looked up, unsure how to respond. "We didn't win," he murmured. His father shook his head. "You did more than win. You gave that creature a reason to live. And maybe you gave me one too." His voice broke on the last words, but Eli understood. They had both been carrying their own kind of weight, their own grief, and somehow, through this small miracle, both had begun to heal. The announcer presented Eli with a small medal, nothing grand, just a token of courage. "For compassion and perseverance," he said, smiling. Eli accepted it quietly, then slipped it around Juno's neck instead of his own. The crowd erupted in cheers. For a brief, shining moment, boy and donkey stood in the center of it all, symbols of something pure, something unbreakable. As the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long across the field, the noise of the festival began to fade. Eli led Juno away from the track, each of them limping slightly, but together. The air smelled of dust and victory, and somewhere in the distance, a song drifted through the breeze, a melody of hope. The boy turned once more to look at the field, now empty except for the faint tracks left behind. He smiled, whispering, "We did it, Juno. You showed them." The donkey flicked his tail and pressed his head gently against the boy's shoulder. They walked home in silence, the world bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The journey had taken everything from them, strength, pain, faith, and yet it had given back something far greater. As the last light faded behind the hills, Eli glanced at the medal glinting faintly around Juno's neck. It was small, but it caught the dying sun like fire, a reminder that even the most broken souls could shine when given a chance. And though the race was over, deep down, Eli knew their story had only just begun. The following weeks passed in a haze of calm and quiet. The festival's echoes faded, leaving behind the soft rhythm of daily life. Eli found peace in the routines of the farm, the scent of hay, the murmur of chickens, the sound of Juno's steady hooves on the dirt path. Every morning before sunrise, he would walk out to the small pasture behind their house, where mist hung low over the grass, and Juno waited patiently at the gate. The donkey had recovered slowly, his limp barely visible now, though the scar on his knee remained as a silent reminder of the race. Eli would run his fingers along that scar, sometimes whispering, "You did it, old friend," as if the words alone could carry gratitude deep enough to be felt. His father, too, seemed changed. The quiet man who had once spoken only in commands now lingered near the fences, sometimes watching Eli work, without saying much. On rare mornings, he joined his son in mending stalls or cleaning tack. Their silences no longer felt cold, they were filled with an understanding that didn't need words. "You handle him well," his father said one day, nodding toward Juno. "He trusts you." Eli smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Maybe because I trust him first." The man's lips curved slightly, almost a smile. "That's something I had to learn the hard way." But as peace settled in, so did uncertainty. The medal from the race hung on a nail by Eli's bed, a symbol of pride, yes, but also of something unfinished. He often found himself staring at it, wondering if that single day of courage had been enough. The whispers in the village had changed. People spoke of him with respect now, yet their words carried expectation. Some said the boy and his donkey had the spirit of champions, others dismissed it as luck. Eli didn't care much for either opinion, but a question grew inside him nonetheless. What next? That answer came sooner than he expected. One afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the stable slats, a stranger arrived at their gate. He was a tall man in a long brown coat, his hat tipped low. "You're the boy from a race, aren't you?" he asked, his voice rough, but not unkind. Eli nodded warily. The man introduced himself as Samuel Hayes, a horse breeder and trainer from a neighboring town. I saw what you did that day, he said. That wasn't about speed. It was about heart. I could use someone like that. Eli blinked, unsure how to respond. His father stepped forward, studying the man with a guarded expression. What kind of work are you offering? He asked. Samuel smiled slightly. Training, caretaking, learning, if the boy's willing. I run a stable not far from here, one that could use hands who understand animals, not just how to ride them. The offer hung in the air, heavy and tempting. For a moment Eli imagined it, the chance to work with horses every day, to learn their ways, to see beyond his small village. But then he looked at Juno, standing behind him in the field, and hesitation crept in. I can't just leave him, Eli said quietly. Samuel's eyes softened. Then bring him, if that's what it takes. His father exhaled slowly, as though weighing something long, unspoken. It's a good opportunity, he said at last. Better than any I had at your age. The words carried pride, but also a trace of sadness. Eli knew what they meant. His father wanted him to go, to live beyond the boundaries that had held them both. That night, Eli lay awake, listening to the creak of the old house, the soft shuffle of Juno outside the window. The idea of leaving home both thrilled and frightened him. He remembered the race, the laughter, the fall, the applause. All of it had led to this, the moment when courage demanded more than one act, when it became a path. We could start again, he whispered into the darkness. A new field, a new race. Outside, Juno let out a quiet bray, as if answering yes. By morning, the decision was made. His father helped him pack what little he owned, some clothes, a few tools, and a small carved token his mother had once made, now worn smooth from years of touch. At the gate, his father clasped his shoulder. You've got her kindness, he said softly. Don't lose it, no matter how far you go. The mention of his mother stirred something deep in Eli, a memory of laughter and sunlight that had long since dimmed. He nodded, unable to speak. The journey to Samuel's stable took most of the day. Juno trotted beside the wagon, his coat gleaming in the sun, his steps sure and strong. The road wound through fields and forests, past streams that glittered like silver threads. For Eli, it felt like stepping into another world. When they finally arrived, the sight took his breath away. Rows of stables stretched beneath oak trees, horses of every color grazing in the wide paddocks beyond. The air smelled of hay and salt and freedom. Samuel led them to a modest cabin near the barn. You can stay here, he said. You'll work with me at dawn. We train horses for endurance, not for show. You'll learn the difference soon enough. Eli nodded eagerly, though inside he wondered if he was ready. That night, as he settled onto the small cot, Juno brayed softly outside, restless in the unfamiliar place. It's all right, Eli murmured through the open window. We've started over before. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of work consumed him. Eli rose before dawn, brushing and feeding the horses, tending to injuries, and learning from Samuel how to read a horse's movement before it broke into stride. Juno adapted too, finding his place among the others, sometimes stubborn, sometimes gentle, always loyal. Samuel watched them closely, often shaking his head with quiet amusement. That donkey's got more sense than most riders I've met, he'd say, half joking, half serious. Eli grew stronger, both in body and in spirit. He learned patience, balance, the subtle ways an animal's trust could be earned. But with every passing day, the dream of racing again began to stir. Samuel noticed. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, he said, There's another race next month. Not the village kind, a real one. Open fields, long distance, rough ground. It's not about speed. It's about endurance. That might suit you and your friend. Eli's pulse quickened. The thought of facing a race again, not for pride but for purpose, made something burn inside him. Do you think we could? He asked. Samuel looked at Juno, then back at the boy. You've both got the heart for it. That's worth more than any pedigree. In the quiet that followed, Eli felt the weight of choice again, the same pull that had guided him from the starting line, through the fall, through every step since. He turned toward Juno, who stood in the fading light, ears flicking toward the breeze. The boy smiled faintly. What do you say, old friend? One more race. Juno let out a low, steady bray, the sound rolling through the twilight like an oath. And in that moment, Eli knew the story wasn't finished. The road ahead was long, uncertain, but alive with promise. Together they would run again, not to win, but to prove that courage, once kindled, could light every path that followed.